Eddie. Uh-oh, we can't hear Eddie now. We're working with a new producer. Give us a second. We're about to start. Did we lose Eddie? We just tested all this stuff. It happens. All right, I'll play the music real quick, and we'll figure this out. Here we go.
You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Homefield Apparel.
And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another edition of the Assembly Call, where we discuss the most important topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 1041st episode of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of October 17th, 2024. I am your host, Jerod Morris. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
Takes a shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
This week's banner moment occurred on Monday when the AP preseason top 25 poll was released. While some of the computer rankings have Indiana in the 30s, the human rankers are a little more bullish on the Hoosiers' revamped roster, with AP voters ranking Indiana 17th. The Hoosiers are joined by fellow Big Ten teams Purdue, 14th, UCLA, 22nd, and Rutgers, 25th, and 7 other Big Ten teams received votes. Now, as we've become accustomed to as IU fans, lofty preseason rankings guarantee absolutely nothing. The 2017 team, for example, was ranked number 11 in the preseason, got as high as number 3, and ended the season with the coach getting fired. And if you compare Indiana's preseason KenPom rankings to their end-of-season rankings for the last 11 seasons, the Hoosiers have underperformed expectations by an average of almost 20 spots per season. In other words, we've become accustomed to underperformance. But on the other hand, and this is important, since the incredible Big Ten championship season of 1989 that occurred 35 years ago, only one Indiana team that wasn't ranked in the preseason has gone on to do anything noteworthy. That was the 2011-12 team, which started the season unranked and ended up making the Sweet 16. The 2002 team was number 22 in the preseason. The 2013 team was number 1 in the preseason. And the 2016 team was number 15 in the preseason. Those are Indiana's last 3 Big Ten champions who also made the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. So if we're going to set the minimum success bar for this season at compete for a Big Ten championship and make the second weekend of the NCAA tournament, which seems more than fair, history suggests that being ranked in the preseason is a prerequisite, though again, certainly no guarantee for it to happen. And if you buy that logic, then consider the first of many boxes for the 2024-2025 redemption season checked. All right, now let me introduce my co-host this week. Andy and Ryan had prior commitments this evening, so they will not be able to join us. But here with me, we have the founder of Delphi Bracketology, a longtime high school basketball coach in the state of Indiana, and a man who knows how to celebrate a thrilling win in your rival's home gym late into the night.
DeVito!
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the coach.
He remembers the days when a movie cost $1. Heaven help you if you ever decide to pop your collar. Play hard, but remember, fake hustle is a crime. He's the coach and it's Tonsoni time.
Coach, it is Tonsoni time. What's on your mind this evening?
Yeah, it's just an exciting time right now in Bloomington. You got a lot of good things going on with the football team, and excited there. And then basketball tomorrow night, Hoosier Hysteria, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I am a fan of watching the new players. And I think there's so many young people and fans that don't get the opportunity to see the Indiana that'll be able to go tomorrow night and check out the Indiana Hoosiers. And it's a new season with the new roster, and hope is in the air for the basketball program. So a lot of good things. There's baseball on, a lot of things going on well in the area of sports, and especially Indiana. So looking forward to talking a little bit of basketball, and at the end talking about my man Coach Zignetti, who's getting it done so far for the Indiana football Hoosiers.
Absolutely. All right. And also here with us, we have a special guest. He's one of the brightest basketball minds to come out of the IU Sports Media Department in the last 20 years. Shouldn't say come out of. He's still in the IU Sports Media Department. He's written for the Indianapolis Star. He's the co-director of WIUX Sports. He does play-by-play and color analysis for Big Ten Plus. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show, Zion Brown. Good applause. Zion, thanks for being here, man. How are you feeling about the off season so far for Indiana basketball and just Indiana sports in general right now?
Good. Obviously, I think almost everybody saw that stat. Both basketball teams and the football team are all ranked for the first time ever. I'm here in Bloomington. There's a lot of excitement around all of it. And, yeah, it's crazy that we're this close to basketball season. And not all the eyes are on it yet, which is obviously different than what we're used to around these parts.
Yeah, football doesn't usually provide this much of a pleasant distraction in the fall. So it's kind of nice to be able to focus on football and be a little bit distracted. But as you said, with two ranked basketball teams, there's a lot to pay attention to in basketball as well. We're very excited to be back with you tonight on the Assembly Call. We are going to roll through some headlines. Then in segment 2, we've got 3 IU basketball topics that we want to hit here as we round into the home stretch of the basketball offseason. And then segment 3, as we did last week, we got to talk some football because there's a big game coming on Saturday. Coach Ignetti, I thought, had some really interesting media comments this week, and so we're going to break some of those down. All of that coming this week on Assembly Call Radio. But first, let's talk about our presenting sponsor.
Home field apparel, wear one for the team.
That's right. This edition of Assembly Call Radio, just like all shows on the Back Home Network, presented by our friends at Home Field Apparel, where they have the largest collection of vintage IU apparel that you will find anywhere. And it's not just IU. Home Field has unique, interesting designs printed on the softest, most comfortable, most stylish fabrics for over 150 colleges and universities, plus plenty of other brands like Little 5, IndyCar, and much more. So as you start to think about Christmas shopping, yes, Christmas shopping, I know it's only October, but it's going to come faster than you think. Just know that Home Field can serve as a one-stop online shop for pretty much anyone on your list. And they're always expanding and trying something new, like their recent launch of the Campus Classic pullovers, which look incredible. The only bad part for IU fans is that IU stuff tends to sell out immediately because we are their flagship brand. So if you want to have a shot at getting stuff when it's released, you really need to follow them on social, subscribe to their texts, their emails, make sure you're staying up to date so that you don't miss anything. And we should mention, Zion, you wrote a profile about Home Field Apparel for Indy Star recently, which I hope everybody had a chance to read. I'll put it in the show notes in case anybody missed that. I'm just curious. This is the Home Field promo part. What was the most interesting thing that you learned kind of researching Connor and the history of Home Field to write that article?
I think it was, I don't know if I would say I learned it, but just how much I got to really understand it is their dedication to being true and authentic to each school, each team, each fan base. I think I put a quote in there that they were like, if there was something, a logo or a slogan that was only used for the basketball team, we're not going to throw it on a shirt or a hoodie that's supposed to be a football hoodie for your school, and it's like stuff like that, the attention to detail. I got to go up to their offices and their work area up in Speedway, and it was just so cool to just see the way everybody in that office was working on different things, kind of, and just making sure everything ran smoothly and that everything was precise. They do not make lackadaisical products, right? And that shows in their products, that shows in how well they sell and how well their business has done. And it was just amazing to witness it all and be able to write a story on them.
Yeah, Connor really is like the Kurt Signetti of apparel CEOs. He really is. Anyway, go to homefieldapparel.com. Our friends, they should be your friends. Use our promo code HOME23 to get 15% off your first order. That's promo code HOME23 for 15% off. But again, pay attention to wherever they're doing messaging because you might be able to get, if you've ordered before, you may be able to find additional promo codes for additional discounts. Once again, the website, homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. All right, real quick, a rundown of some new stuff that we have going on the Back Home Network. Crimson Cast is going to have a preview of the IU-Nebraska game with Taylor Lehman. I don't know exactly when that's coming out. I don't think it's out yet, but it'll probably be out by Friday. So make sure that you listen to that to get you ready for the game on Saturday. Galen did the weekly Bison chat. I got a comment from one of my friends in Zoom who listened to that. He said, listen to Galen on Bison Chat while at the gym. Man, he is having fun. Really happy for him and the interest that comes to the pod as a result, which is true. I don't think there's anybody I'm happier for about IU football's success than Galen and also Scott, just for all the bad football that they have talked about and to now be able to go through this season. So you got Crimson Cast and the Bison Chat for that. Our friends X's and Joe's recently did an episode on sports fan biases that was really interesting. The Doing the Work crew continuing their season previews of all Big Ten teams. And then our new show, The Dribble Drive with Austin Render, covering Big Ten women's basketball, had a twofer this week. So all those shows on the Back Home Network, you can find them wherever you listen to podcasts and on our YouTube channel. So check them out and stay up to date on IU sports. All right, gentlemen. Coach, you mentioned Hoosier Hysteria. It is coming Friday night. It starts at 7:30 Eastern time. The doors open at 6:30. You are encouraged to bring non-perishable items for the Hoosier Hills Food Bank. This is typically their biggest food drive of the year. The event will be hosted by Trisha Whitaker, an IU alum who currently works as a sideline reporter for the Tampa Bay Rays and for MLB Friday Night Baseball. The schedule is player and coach intros, which we're used to, skills competitions, and then a scrimmage. I don't know exactly how long that scrimmage will be, but the team is slated to scrimmage. To watch it, you will have to have BTN Plus. And really, I can't really recommend anymore doing the 1 or 2 month BTN Plus thing because there's going to be so many women's basketball games on there. Just get BTN Plus and keep it throughout the year because I think you're going to want it this year because of all the content that they're going to have on there. Zion, are you going to Hoosier Hysteria? And if not, I'm sure you'll be watching. What are some of the things that you're going to be watching for? What do you kind of get excited about when it comes to this event every year?
Yeah, I won't be there live this year. You mentioned Austin Render. He and I are actually going to be calling a high school football game together up at Bloomington North tomorrow night. So I won't be there live, but I'll try to go back and watch the scrimmage part just to see what we see and just see how seriously they all take it, and just to kind of look at what are some of the lineups that are used and how the team looks together on the court because there's so many new pieces.
Yeah. What about you, Coach? I know it's kind of a running joke that this isn't your favorite event, but what do you like to watch for when this one rolls around?
Well, first of all, where I'll be watching it tomorrow night, I got 2 students' media passes to the Purdue-Oregon game, so I'm going to be watching Hoosier Hysteria from the press box prior to the start of the Oregon-Purdue football game. But we have a kid on the field for a photographer and one up in the press box. Can't pass that up. But I will get my eyes on Hoosier Hysteria. I just want to see the players. Again, I think Zion's right with I don't know how serious they're going to take it. Sometimes it's an NBA All-Star game, and that's fun to watch. And I don't know how many offenses or defensive things are going to be done, but you get to know the players. And with so many new players, you get to see faces, numbers. I'm just a huge Miles Rice fan from afar. Haven't watched a lot of his film, but his story and the quotes coming out about his leadership, as well as what he brings from the point guard. I think if Indiana's going to be successful this year, he's going to have a huge piece of that, and I just want to see him. So I just want to see what the individual players look like, how they flow on the court, some of the things they do. Obviously, the Tennessee scrimmage and the Marion scrimmage will tell us a heck of a lot more in a game situation than any scrimmage in Hoosier Hysteria. But it's just a party. It's a party for the fans. It's a coming out party for the young men who are new and old veterans. So it's a good night for a lot of people, and looking forward to it.
I agree. The best part is just seeing the new guys in the uniforms, seeing the old guys get the ovations, that their hard work has earned them. That's always the most fun part. And then you just hope no one gets hurt. That's it. Just get through it, no injuries.
So I don't like the dunk contest
toward the season. Well, I know. I know. Okay, so speaking of the charity exhibition, so that's the other thing I want to talk about here. Make sure everybody is aware that is coming on Sunday, October 27th. I don't know if we'll have a show between now and then. We are certainly going to try to have a post-game show for that, so we just have to see who all is available. It's Sunday. The Packers play, so I may have other priorities at my house. I may be watching the kids for that day, but we'll see. We will see what happens, and if we can do a post-game show for that, we will. But that game is going to be at 3 o'clock on Sunday, October 27th. It's on SEC Network Plus, which I think you get if you have an ESPN Plus subscription. or a cable package that has the SEC Network on it, or at least SEC Network Plus on it. This game, all the proceeds for this game will be supporting the John McClendon Foundation, which offers scholarships for minority students who intend to pursue a postgraduate degree in athletics administration. And so it'll be interesting. I mean, Zion, and we're going to talk about this in segment 2. There's been a lot of talk about the offense, how the offense might look different. We just saw tonight, Rutgers playing in an exhibition game against St. John's. So we're finally starting to see, some teams get out there and play their first live action. How are you going to approach a game like this? Because it's one of those, you certainly don't want to overreact. It's just the first exhibition game, and, teams are going to be trying different things, and who knows exactly how they'll set it up. But what do you think is kind of reasonable to expect to take away from a game like this?
I think you're looking for just how well a team may click together. Obviously, it won't be perfect. Obviously, there's going to be turnovers and kind of miscues and mistakes. But just seeing, okay, does it look like the last couple months of training and practice have really paid off and gotten you to where you can maybe start to form an identity? There's a lot of season left to go, so I'm not saying next Sunday is going to be the day you have to figure out what you are exactly, but maybe you see something starting to form and see some of these new guys integrate with the guys that have been around Woodson in the program now for a few years, and really just getting a good view of what that looks like.
Yeah,
Zion,
I think, Coach, you mentioned Miles Rice, Coach, and to me that's the biggest thing I want to see is with the ball in his hands, how different does the offense look? Because everything is going to start with him. So what are you going to be watching for next Sunday?
Well, Zion makes a great point too. Indiana needs to gel as quick as possible. They haven't in the 3 years under Coach Woodson, and it's not fair to think they're going to play their best basketball in the first exhibition. Like, there's going to be growth throughout the season. But one of the things that we mentioned is you can't just make a 5-game run at the end of the season and get where you want to go. You've got to play well, because that tournament and Thanksgiving is going to really determine your seeding. And you need to gear it up and find what offenses and defenses and all of that quickly. So to some extent, you want to see how far they are in that gel in their first 2 exhibition games. So that, I think that was a great point. I want to watch defensively, on-ball defensive, what they do defensively, their rotations and rebounding. We all focus on, are they going to play small? Are they going to shoot the 3? We'll talk about that a little bit later, all that stuff, because most fans, including myself, love the offensive side. But this team's going to get to where it needs to be to win a Big Ten championship, to get to a Sweet 16 if they can guard. And one of the problems when you bring people in, everyone practices in the gym shooting. They don't practice their closeouts and their stance and their rotations and their blockouts, and that's a lot of, toughness and effort. That has to be drilled in by the coaching staff. And Indiana at times, I thought, did not do that. So how quickly can they show some defensive success? And again, we all have to be patient, game 1. But there is a sense of urgency this year for the year and to play better earlier. So if you get a good jump start on the season in your exhibitions, that's a good sign, I think. So that's what I'm going to be watching when they're in Knoxville.
Yeah, no, it's huge. I mean, Coach, as we've said, you could tell in the exhibition games last year that there were issues that plagued this team for the first 6 to 8 weeks of the season. And you don't want to overreact to those things, but I agree with you. I think November is really important. This team really needs to come out clicking on all cylinders, not just win some of these games, but win some of these games convincingly. And so I don't think they're going to go out and win the exhibition game against Tennessee convincingly, but you want to see some of those signs that, that they're getting close to ready for regular season basketball. And the other thing, for a game like that to me is a guy like Bryson Tucker. How ready is he going to be early on for a role? Does he look kind of confused, or does he look ready to play? And then Ja'Kai Newton, is he out there? Is he playing? We really have no idea what we're going to get from him this season. And so, what does he look like out there, hopefully in his first live competition?
One of the things for our listeners to watch for, I think Coach Woodson has a history of playing these like a regular season game. Some coaches will try to get everyone in and get playing time, get everyone on film. But that first time when Woodson took over and went to the Bahamas, there were players who didn't play down at the Bahamas. He was playing that to win. That's his mentality. So watch for that too. But how does Tennessee play it, right? Are they playing 10, 11, 12 guys? So the outcome of that can be, we got to be careful, win or lose or whatever, because of the different styles of what coaches want to accomplish. And I'm not saying one's better than the other, but there could be two different, if Tennessee plays 12 and Indiana plays a 7 or 8 man rotation for the most part, that favors Indiana in that exhibition game. And I believe that's important. I don't mind that. I would play everyone and try to get everyone on tape because I want to see it. But I just said you got to gel early, and so start winning early. Like, if you're going to do something, well, Signetti's got all these now quotes about how you do something is how you do everything. So how you play the exhibition is going to be how you play the regular season. Don't take it off. Don't mess around in the exhibition. So watch for that, though, the strategy of the coaches in rotations and how they play the strategy of an exhibition game like that.
Yep. All right. And the last headline here, not really something that we want to dive into too much, but I think it is at least worth mentioning. As first reported by the IDS, then at Indy Star, Inside the Hall, and elsewhere, former IU players Charlie Miller and Harris Muyezinovich, and I think another player who is not named, filed a class action lawsuit against Indiana University alleging sexual abuse by former team doctor Brad Bomba. Back in September, IU announced that it retained Jones Day, the law firm, to launch an independent review into the allegations, which I believe is still going on. I've read most of the complaint that was filed. We're not going to get into the details here because it's very far outside the scope of our expertise. I would just say, resist the urge to pass judgment right now. Any complaint like this is serious. It should be treated that way. Indiana seems to be doing so, but smarter people than us are going to figure out what needs to happen next. And so we're not really going to dive into the details because I just don't think it's smart for us to do because we don't really have anything useful to say about it. But that is out there. And so it's just a story to follow, and we'll update you, whenever the legal process or whatever process happens next kind of takes its next steps. So unless you guys have anything that you'd like to throw in on that story, we can we can move on. All right, so let's move on. Coming up on the assembly call, let's launch into some more in-depth Indiana basketball talk here. We're going to talk about the preseason rankings, how to view those, how to look at recruiting at a macro level right now, because obviously some recruiting news has come in for Indiana that hasn't necessarily been the best in terms of high school recruiting. Should we be concerned? How concerned should we be? And then also what Zion makes of Indiana's stated plan to change up the offense. That's all coming next. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All right. Well, hello to everybody who is here live. Thanks for being here. Good to see you all. IU Artifacts, greetings from Heartwork Brewing. Very nice. Very nice. How many people in the chat are going to the game on Saturday? Let us know. And I also should mention, I'll mention this when we go into segment 2, that Zion will be announcing the first exhibition game against Marion, which will be great. All righty. Oh, Eddie's going to the game. Very nice. Yes, producer Eddie is on the controls. We had a little hiccup there at the beginning. StreamYard did something weird to the audio. We are back.
It's my fault. It's my fault. Coach was smiling because he said, "Gotcha, so-called professional."
I know. Spending so much time talking about how the basketball team needs to get, be ready to play from the beginning. We have a few kinks to work out before the regular season gets here. Clearly,
we'll figure it out.
I haven't said this, but I'm glad Eddie's here because of, and I'm sure everyone in the chat mob's glad Eddie here, so I don't screw up the soundboard or whatever like I normally do. So now we got someone back there. But Eddie, thanks for doing that. Glad you're here, and hello everyone, especially Jen. Hi Jen, miss you.
I do too. All right, we'll talk about Tony Bennett in segment 3 when we talk about great coaches. But let's hop into segment 2 and talk about some basketball. Eddie.
What's up, y'all? It's Devontae Green giving you the green light to watch Assembly Call after every IU game. Just don't listen to their opinions about shot selection. Remember, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Go Hoosiers.
Man, somebody, I think it was Chad Schwarzkopf, posted video of Devontae Green. I don't know where he's playing right now, but it was like a highlight video of Devontae just making shot after shot after shot, and it gave me Florida State flashbacks. when he went off. Devontae had his ups and downs, but when Devontae was on, it was one of the most fun things to watch that we've gotten in the last 10 years. So continued good luck and success to Devontae. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris here with Coach Brian Tonsoni and our special guest, Zion Brown. Segment 2, sponsored by our friends at Hoosier Ticket Project. They are helping families experience IU sporting events for the first time, creating those meaningful moments. They accept donated tickets, and they make sure those get in the hands of families who have never been to IU games so that they can do that for the first time. You can support them at HoosierTicketProject.org. And especially for these games coming up, where there's going to be opposing Big Ten fans who want to get into the stadium. If you donate your tickets to Hoosier Ticket Project, if you can't go, they're going to go to IU fans. So check them out, HoosierTicketProject.org. All right, guys. So I started off the show in the banner moment talking about the preseason rankings. Indiana 17th in the AP poll, a little bit lower in the computer rankings. I think Torvik has us 30th. Ken Pom has us 39th. I kind of gave you my thoughts on it, just in terms of it guarantees nothing. But certainly you'd rather be ranked in the preseason than not, because it tends to be a reflection of the talent that you have on your roster, and then you've got to turn that talent into a good team. But Coach, how do you view preseason rankings now? And I'm especially curious, with your experience now doing bracketology, how do you look at this? Like, what frame of reference do you use for these preseason rankings?
Yeah, so I'm going to say go two different directions on this. As a program, it's always good to be ranked. But I also think you need to be cautious, because with so many transfers around the country, we just watched Rutgers tonight, and they look to be really good offensively, and Pico needs to get them a little bit better defensively. And I watched Memphis earlier in North Carolina, but everyone has a good group. I think I told you this, like everyone's excited about all their transfers, and everyone's happy right now for the most part. And so it's good that we're getting that recognition, especially after a down year. That builds excitement. It gives the players and the coaches, for all their hard work in the portal and in the offseason, a little bit of reward. And it puts a little pressure on people to play the way they need to play, because Indiana basketball should be in the top 20 all the time. I think that's a fair expectation. So we're actually on the low end of where we need to be as a program, and now let's just keep building up. Human rankings are interesting too, because there's bias of where you cover and all of those kinds of things. And then the computer rankings, a lot of them are older statistics, baked in and like that. And I love Ken Pom, but I really love Ken Pom in December, in January, when things start to flesh out. So it's good. It's a measuring stick. You look for trends. From a bracketology, nothing. It means nothing, because we look at, we'll start talking about teams when they're 3-0 or 5-0. Do they have good wins? We look at their actual results, not what people are guessing at this point. So it's good. I think it's a positive, and we need positive in the basketball program. So look at it as a positive, and then hope that we stay there all year long.
Zion, I'm curious to get your thoughts on that, and then also just kind of the feeling on campus. We've talked to on a few of our recent shows. I think some of the older generation of IU fans that I've talked to are kind of approaching this season with excitement because of the roster, but a little bit of caution. I think 11 years of underperformance, as we talked about, can kind of take its toll a little bit. It's not that folks aren't excited and don't recognize the potential of this team, but there is just a little bit of, let's see it first. And I'm just curious, like kind of on the ground in Bloomington, especially with the students, if that's at all the case, or if folks are more have their normal excitement, which is certainly what I hope for.
I would agree with that being the case. Maybe not as pessimistic as maybe some of the kind of adults and alum can be about things, but there's certainly just a wait and see approach to the way people are going about the basketball team. Like, I haven't heard too much about Hoosier Hysteria throughout this week, for example. I've definitely heard more about the football game and about like big noon kickoff, and of course it's homecoming week, so that's its own thing anyway. So, but there's a certain level of excitement that is okay. I think everybody realizes that unless something goes terribly wrong, this team should be better than what we saw last year on the court. But it's still like, I want to wait and see just how good this team is. And I think another part of that is just the schedule this year, where in the first couple months of the season, there's not going to be a huge game in Assembly Hall for students to really rile around, right? The South Carolina game is kind of like, okay, that'll be a decent game probably. But the last few years you've had, North Carolina come in, Kansas come in. So you've had those games in November and December that really got people excited early on in the season, where I think this year it'll be more of a case where people will be watching from afar when they go to Atlantis. And if they, get 2 good wins there or something, then people will be ready and hyped kind of once us students get back from Thanksgiving, and then they'll get really excited about what can be of this year's team.
And by the way, I should let our podcast listeners know when they tune in for the Marion exhibition game on BTN Plus, you'll be announcing that game. Are you doing play-by-play or color for that game?
Yes, I am. I'll be calling that game. I'll be doing play-by-play. My good friend Kevin Navarro will be on color, and Audrey Marr will be sideline. It's going to be exciting. It's right before I'm also calling the Michigan State football game, which is the next day. So it's going to be a long weekend, but I'm excited to call those 2 games back to back.
Man, very nice. Are you calling any other men's basketball games?
Not that'll be on Big Ten Plus, no.
Okay, but you'll be doing it for – because what's your coverage going to look like this year? We forgot to get into that when I introduced you.
Yeah. I'll just go through it. Yeah. I'll be covering both the men's and women's teams for IUS TV. So you can find me there on the website, and then just online, Twitter, doing stories, packages, studio work for them. And then, as always, as I have been the last couple of years, I will be calling games for the men's team on WIUX.
Yeah. So if you get annoyed at the announcers, which does tend to happen as we go through a season, especially when we get national broadcasters who don't seem to have watched more than like a game and a half of Indiana, tune into Zion, because he actually knows what's going on and can announce the game, understanding the context of what he's watching. So glad
Zion,
to be doing all that this year, Zion.
I can't tell you how much people appreciate what you guys do when you do those broadcasts, and how well they are, and how, there's a little sense of pride too when you're alum and you see people, young people starting up in their careers doing stuff like that. But the quality has been really, really good in all the sports. I have Big Ten Plus for, soccer and baseball and all of that. And I really, it's a good chance for me to say thank you for what you do. It's very much appreciated.
I truly appreciate that from both of you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about recruiting. And this is a topic that we've said that we're just going to cover less on this show in terms of covering individual recruits, because it's such a different landscape now. And there's so much information out there, and any individual recruitment just kind of feels like it means less because of how much movement there is, and then how there's the portal. Like it always seems like there's kind of a next phase you can go into where you can make up for a lost recruit. And so you kind of just need to get to November and see what your roster is before you really judge anything. With that said, I think there's a reason to talk about it now, because there has been a lot of talk about the class of 2025 in the state of Indiana. When you have a guy like Jalen Harrelson, who's been a top 20 recruit for 3 or 4 years now. Braylon Mullins is a guy who was, in the hundreds, in the 80s, and blew up, into being a 5-star guy. Trent Sisley, who has been really highly regarded and who already committed to Indiana that we talked about. Well, some of the news that has come in recently for Indiana hasn't been great. Jalen Harrelson committed to Notre Dame. Eric Ryby, who is a center prospect that Indiana was on, committed to UConn. Braylon Mullins is announcing his decision next week, but there's just kind of been some pessimism on what he's going to do, with people thinking he may end up going to UConn. And so I guess my question to you guys is, how concerned are you by the fact that, if trends kind of go as we think, and there's other guys, Bryson Tiller, Michael Brown, there's some other guys that Indiana is in with, but maybe aren't necessarily assumed to be the leader with. And so it's very possible Indiana could, come out of this, fall recruiting cycle just having the one commitment of Trent Sisley. And so I guess on the one hand, it's a concern when you're investing resources in guys, you're not getting them, especially certain in-state guys where you think, man, it'd really be nice to, to kind of get these guys because you feel like you have a leg up in the recruitment. But, as we've, our friends on X's and Joe's have talked about, Coach, as we've seen in some reports by evanmaya.com, there's 3 things that you need to succeed in college basketball right now. You need high-end talent, you need experience, and you need continuity. And how you arrive at those 3 things can be different. For example, this year, Indiana lost a lot off last year's roster and didn't bring in a big high school class, but you have multi-year transfers in Miles Rice and Kanan Carlisle, who could be here for 2 or 3 years. And so they're transfers, but they could be part of bringing some stability if you keep them over the next couple of years. And they're obviously talented guys. But, you look at what we have on the roster right now. We know we're losing Ballo, Goody, Galloway, Leal, James, could lose a guy like Carlisle or Mbako to the NBA. Anyone could transfer at any time. So can you keep, top talents like Malik Renew, Mackenzie Mbako, Miles Rice, and Bryson Tucker? Are guys like Gabe Cupps and Ja'Kai Newton good enough to provide the meaningful stability? We don't know because we just haven't seen them play a ton. And can you hit another portal home run? So I kind of find myself, whereas it really felt like kind of last year we were kind of really hanging on each one of these recruitments, like, man, this is really life or death. And I just have a much different mindset about it now, where it's like, would you like to get Braylon Mullins? Yes, because he's an in-state guy. He's at a position of need for shooting. You would think that maybe he could provide stability for a couple of years, unless he's good enough to go pro. But if he's good enough to go pro, then he helps you in that category of high-end talent, right? So it's just, I guess I'm still figuring out how to process all of this, because even if we do go into it with Sicily, this has been a program that has shown success in the spring and some short recruitments. And so I'm just trying to give folks some guidance on kind of how to approach this. And I'm still figuring it out myself a little bit, but it just feels like right now is not the time to panic about it. It may be time to have a slight bit of concern, put a little question mark up, but there's just so much to play out in recruiting now, especially into the spring and into the summer, that I just don't see a whole lot of reason to get too worked up about it now, especially with the season about to start.
Yeah, it's recruiting's important, but recruiting's changed because of the transfer portal. And so if you don't get your wins with the freshman class that you want, it's not panic like it was 5, 10, 15 years ago, where you're going to have a down year, then maybe 2 years until you get that next cycle in. You can go get immediate help. So, I don't think there's a major concern about fielding teams, especially with Indiana's NIL ability. I think people are always going to be attracted to come to Indiana via the transfer portal because of the paycheck that they can get. I just think that's a bonus in that recruiting. So I don't know that there's a whole lot of pressure on getting freshmen. I think at the least you want to make sure you maintain good relationships with freshmen in case you lose them and they go to Connecticut or they go somewhere else and it doesn't pan out and then they want to transfer back to Indiana. I mean, these guys are top end. I don't know that that'll happen, but Luke Goody did that. He always wanted to play at Indiana. He's an Indiana guy. He came back for maybe 2 years if he gets whatever waiver. So mostly it's not that big of a deal. It's not a deal breaker. But there is some concern of these longer-term freshman recruits not necessarily coming to a Mike Woodson program. I think it's fair to have some concern on that. I think Hood Schifino, but then everyone else is these short turnarounds where they've left because of coaching changes or things like that, where Woodson's really good at getting those guys into the program and the transfer portal. So his strength is in two areas. He has a weakness in those longer term in-state types things that hopefully a change maybe in style of play and things, and you get some success and then that'll break. So 2 out of 3 areas, I think Woodson does a pretty good job. The other one is not up to par, but overall I think it's okay.
Zion, how are you viewing recruiting these days?
Yeah, I'd say, I think it's pretty clear when you watch like the Elite Eight, Final Four. Good college basketball rosters today have a solid mix of those in-house guys that have been there for 2 or 3 years at the very least, and guys that are transfers that have maybe only been there for 1 or 2 years. So it's important to recruit both, but I'm not sure should be anywhere near like panic or concern mode for IU fans right now. I had a friend actually send me the other day a graphic that has Butler right now is top 5 in the 2025 recruiting rankings. And he was like, "Does Butler really have that great of a class?" And I think it's decent, but right now it's more of a quantity over quality thing for a lot of those teams that are at the top of those like 247 rankings. Not a lot of the top players have committed right now in this class, and a lot of that is because of the transfer portal. I think going forward, we will see that take longer and longer because kids are like, well, I don't want to go there. And then all of a sudden, this guy that's been in college for 3 or 4 years at my position, who is probably better than me right now, is just going to take all my minutes away. So I feel like we're at a state where a lot of those recruits are either A, waiting longer to get their scholarship offers in the first place, or B, just kind of waiting out to see where a program's trajectory may be going by the time they do actually commit and end up signing with the team. So that leads to some slower classes and some slower commitments. And I feel like that's what we're seeing with some of the higher prospects right now. But obviously we'll see how it unfolds with guys like Mullins and other players going forward that IU is really targeting and going after.
Yeah, and Indiana really seems with its high school recruiting to be targeting, guys toward the top of the charts, real high-end talent. And so you're not seeing Indiana necessarily now, Sicily, I think, his ranking dropped, somewhere into the 70s or 80s, but he was higher before that. But you're not really seeing Indiana get kind of the recruit and develop type guys. CJ Gunn and Caleb Banks, for example, were kind of guys that you hoped would develop and come around and they could start to form the backbone of that continuity and experience. But obviously that didn't work out and they went elsewhere. And I think that was good decisions for them and good decisions for the program. And so you had to backfill, so that's where I think if you can develop a guy like Gabe Cupps, maybe to be that rock solid, backup point guard, behind Miles Rice or whoever else is there. Ja'Kai Newton, probably has, a higher ceiling than Gabe Cupps. But if he's a guy who can be in the program for 3 or 4 years, you do need some of those. And Indiana has that right now with Trey Galloway, with Malik Renew, with Anthony Leal. But as those guys start to cycle out, who's going to backfill those guys as, kind of the keeper of the culture? Because I do think you need that. They don't always have to be fully homegrown, but they better at least have 2 or 3 years in the program. And so I think that's where, we were able to, kind of, turn over half the roster, I think, in a really good way this season. That could be a difficult way to live year after year after year. And so I think anybody who questions that a little bit, I think that's fair. But you really do just kind of have to take it on a year by year basis now. And it's really hard to project rosters forward. So the season's here, focus on the season. And let recruiting happen after that. I really, Coach, almost don't want to talk about recruiting at all between November and March, really, unless there's big news, because, all the important stuff's going to happen after that, and there's so much going on.
Musselman gets 12 new guys every year at Arkansas and now at USC. Probably Underwood he's only got one returning guy back, and everyone says they're a top 5. So there's just different ways to build, and it'll ultimately be, can Coach Woodson pick his recruiting style, get the guys in, and get them to play together on the offense and defensive, whether it's a transfer portal or young guys, developmental guys. It's a lot of the stuff that we worry about, but really we should worry about when the ball's tipped, at these exhibitions and a regular season. And coaches have different philosophies. You have a guy at Marquette who only wants to do high school recruiting, a guy at Purdue who's really going to do high school recruiting and very minimal pinpointed transfer portals. And then you have those guys that are all in, right? So I think the story, or I guess the grades aren't in yet on which is the absolute best in this new wild, wild west. I happen to think what you said, Jerod, is the best. And Zion was saying that too, that both are important. The freshman class and that's what I believe. But boy, there's some different philosophies out there across college basketball, right? And what the results will show, who gets further in the tournament with what kind of roster. You'll see copycats starting to follow the route of the most successful, I think.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to say you need to like it this way. I think liking it and being okay with it from a results perspective are two different things. And I'm fully on board with folks who just haven't quite caught on yet, and their head are still spinning from, how all of this works right now. But, Zion, I think that's why this season is so important, because if this philosophy is going to work, everything is set up for it to work this season, barring, something catastrophic. But you've got the pieces. Like, we've spent 3 years in the offseason trying to talk ourselves into rosters that objectively didn't make a lot of basketball sense. And yes, we still have the awkward fit of Mbako, Renew, and Ballo playing together, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But you've got a point guard, you've got depth, you've got shooting, proven shooting. You've pretty much got everything you want, except probably a proven backup rim protector. Other than that, the roster is everything that you would want. And so I think a lot of IU fans, and I think this is perfectly reasonable, are looking to this season to say, okay, if this philosophy is going to work, this is a roster it should work with. So let's see it. And then if it does, we'll be ready to put 2 feet in and, say, hey, it just took us a little while to come around on the new era of college basketball. And so I think that's kind of what's at stake. And that's where I think the results of this season are really important, to help kind of win back some folks who have become skeptical, because of just the struggles over the last 3 coaches, which Mike Woodson, had nothing to do with, the 2 previous coaches, but then also his 3 seasons of just kind of some ups and downs. This is where I think you can yank a lot of people back over and say, hey, there's a new plan. Yeah. It's a new world of college basketball, and this is how it's going to work here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm so curious to see now that this is kind of a fully Mike Woodson roster, and I think most of all last year was too. But there's a lot of depth. Like I said, this is the deepest team that IU has had in quite some time. So now you have all these players, all these guys that are coming from different places. You have guys like Gabe Cupps, like Trey Galloway, like Mackenzie Mbako, Malik Renew, who have been around for a few years now. But then you also do bring in a Rice, a Ballo, and people who you're kind of integrating for the first time. And now you got to just make sure you're pushing the right buttons because, like you said, outside of that secondary rim protector and maybe still some shooting issues, you've got just about all you need to put a team together, especially on the offensive end, I think. So it's about figuring out what you are and how you can make sure the right guys are playing together on the court and making sure you just mix that chemistry and mix those guys that you have had for a few years and the new guys coming in as transfers on the team.
Yeah, and one of the big questions is going to be, what does the defense look like? This is a defense that, as we've talked about many times over the last 3 years, is a little bit complicated, does seem to take a while to get guys on the same page. So what does that look like? If you have a very transient roster, are you able to build the defensive continuity that Indiana has had at times, but it really hasn't been, consistent under Mike Woodson. It's kind of felt like there's been, defensive slippage, each year that he's been here. But this year, Zion, it feels like from a defensive standpoint, Indiana will be able to get back to a little bit more of what they did in year 1, which was, pressure the ball a little bit more with Miles Rice. If you remember to what Xavier Johnson did his first year, I mean, he was dynamic defensively and really was the head of the snake defensively, and just due to injuries and ineffectiveness was never quite able to be that guy. And then, of course, when you had Trace Jackson Davis on the back end or Khalil Ware on the back end erasing some mistakes, it really helped the defense. And so this year, you don't have that kind of shot blocker because Ballo is a good rim protector, but he's not as dynamic as Trace or as Khalil was. And obviously Malik Renew and Mackenzie Mbako have their defensive issues that Indiana's going to have to work around. But if they can get back to providing pressure on the ball, which Miles Rice, should be able to do some of, maybe not peak Xavier Johnson, but pretty good. And, with Umar Ballo, provide a strong presence down low that may not be able to block as many shots, but may be able to clean up more rebounds, which may help him compensate, for not being able to block as many shots. It may bring some stability to the defense. Before we get to the offense, like, how are you kind of viewing the parts and pieces right now from a defensive standpoint?
Well, Jerod, you said 2 names there that I feel like you kind of rushed by that I don't think should be, and it is the Malik Renew and Mackenzie Mbako. Like, if you want those guys, I know, but if you want those guys to both play major minutes and for this to be a team that can be, competing to win the Big Ten, they cannot be clear negatives on defense, right? And with Mbako, I did feel like we saw him progress as last year went on. He certainly got better. With Renew, a lot of it is just about the foul trouble, and then it's if he is going to play some 5 this year, can he be that main rim protector? But if those 2 guys are both going to play, 30-ish or maybe more than that minutes a night, you would kind of like for them to be able to hold their own at whatever position they are playing. They're both probably going to play 2 different positions. So that is important to me. But, yeah, you mentioned it. I think perimeter-wise, you have Miles Rice. You'll have Trey Galloway, who I think is a pretty strong defender when he's not overtasked with what he has to do on offense as well. You have guys you can trust. Ballo, like you said, isn't Trace Jackson Davis. He's not Khalil Ware. But at 7 foot, 260 pounds, you feel pretty comfortable with him and just him being able to put his arms up at the rim and block a shot or just contest a shot really well. So I think there are good pieces defensively. I'm really curious to see coverage-wise kind of how they're playing. Is it a lot of drop? They tried to switch a decent amount with Malik Renew last year, and it had mixed success. So I'm really curious to see what they try to do and how often they're playing with 1 or 2 bigs and how that could affect their defense as well as their offense.
Yeah, and Coach, Zion, a really good point there on Trey Galloway. You think back to some of the defense he's played in the past. Remember the Jaden Ivey game, when he really defended Jaden Ivey well. Well, he was able to do that because you had Xavier Johnson and Rob Finney handling the point guard duties. And we weren't able to see that from Trey last year because he had to do so much heavy lifting offensively that you didn't see some of that defense. And so if he can do that, I think you've got a guy like Luke Goody off the bench that isn't dynamic athletically, but is kind of that Miller cop, know where to be a good positional defender. Bryson Tucker is long and athletic. You never want to count on a freshman defensively, but he profiles as a good defensive player. So there's some interesting pieces. There's some odd fits. It could be a better rebounding team. Like the formula just may be a little bit different defensively, but how confident are you that the actual results can be better, certainly than what we saw last year, and maybe even getting back to what they did in year one under Woody?
I will believe it when I see it. I think Zion hit all of my comments right on the head. I think you want to see better defense. It's at the 3 and the 4 spot, and specifically with the gentleman that he mentioned. One way you counter that is with better ball pressure, though, and I think the guards with Galloway and Miles Rice, and I know for a fact that they have been working on ball. That was an emphasis of Coach Woodson's all summer long, was getting up and into the ball, because then your coverage of that nail slot rim and those wide open threes is not as open because the ball handler's struggling, right? And if you lack a little defensive identity or success at the 3 or 4, you put ball pressure, you turn the ball over, you get some points that way. So one way you cover up some weaker defenders is by having really good guard pressure. And I think the bench, I know someone mentioned that, an athlete like Newton, if he's healthy and can get in spot minutes, can come in and maybe shut down a guy who's really Cups was one of those just gnats where you don't like playing against him, right? Always diving on the floor and hands. So I think the perimeter defense is going to be so much better. That's where your hope lies, where the defense is going to be better. But I think the effort and the execution and the intelligence of Renew and Mbako have to be better. It has to be a lot better. And I agree 100% with Zion that you got a rim protector in Balo and you got good defense up front, but coaches are going to find the advantages and find the mismatches, and they're going to watch film and they're going to attack the weak spots on the defense. So, I just think those two are really the key to an improved defensive effort. And then hit rebounding too. I don't think Malik he gets good numbers. He's good. Like, Malik is good, but I think there's times he takes possessions off on the defensive glass, especially when he's closing out on the perimeter. He doesn't go pursue the ball, and then a guy runs in and gets it and so forth. I think those are things that, maybe as a sophomore, he's ready to make that leap defensively. But that's to answer that defensively.
So let's talk about the offense. And we're going to talk here in just a moment about shooting, Coach, because that's been a big emphasis this offseason in terms of who they brought in, and Coach Woodson has talked about a lot. We have a couple of clips from him that we're going to play. But I think there's two obvious ways the offense is going to look different right off the bat. One is Miles Rice, who we mentioned. This is a guy who plays with pace. He puts pressure on the rim. I mean, he wants to get downhill. Now, he's only played 1 year, so we need to see what it looks like from him as a sophomore, but I think he has a big ceiling to grow. And just given how erratic and at times subpar, to be kind, the point guard play was last year, having adequate point guard play would be a huge step up. And Miles Rice has a chance to be all Big Ten level point guard play. So that right there is going to look different. The other thing that's going to look different is, Trace Jackson Davis could play 40 minutes if you needed him to. Khalil Ware, toward the end of the season, was playing in the high 30s. Umar Ballo is not that. He doesn't play that many minutes. He's going to play 65, 70% of the minutes, maybe, somewhere between probably 26 to 30 minutes. And so you're going to have more minutes with your starting 5 on the bench. And while Indiana does have, a guy like Langdon Hatton that they brought in to kind of be a versatile kind of stretch 5 type guy, I think a lot of times you'll probably see Malik sliding down to the 5, which means now Mackenzie Mbako or Luke Goody is probably sliding down and playing the 4. And now you've got a proven shooter at the 4, Malik Renew, who can even step out at the 5. And so you're probably going to have at least 10 to 12 minutes a game where, last year was Peyton Sparks in there and he was going to clog up the middle. So Renew's going to do that some because he's still at his best on the block, but he at least has the ability theoretically to step out. And so just those two ways right there, just because of the personnel and the amount of minutes guys are going to play, the offense is going to look different this year. So leaving shooting aside for a minute, because I want to get to that, what do you think about those differences? And are there any other things that you see with the roster makeup that suggest to you, well, it's obvious it's going to look different because of this?
Going me or Zion?
Yeah, we'll go to you and then Zion.
Okay. The roster just gives flexibility, and then coach has to be creative within that, whether he wants to go small or he wants to go big. I thought Mike DeCourcy said something really good on podcast On the Brink with our friends at Inside the Hall. You really, small ball, whatever, whoever plays the three has to play like a three. If Mbako plays like a wing and can come on, and then there is creative stuff for Mbako to come off and shoot the three, or Goody plays the three with the bigs. There are plenty of schools that have a power forward and a big center and shoot a lot of threes and have some wing offense, right? You don't need to play necessarily 4 perimeters to be able to increase your offense. But there is flexibility and there's depth, right? And really, so we're going to see what Coach Woodson's all about, what he has in his playbook, right? And I think, we'll hear a clip, and I'll be able to talk about what I think he thought in the previous years about shooting. And I don't think he was necessarily wrong if that was his impression, but I do think both the offense and the defense has to be a lot better and a lot more creative in order for Indiana to stay at the 17 or higher ranking.
Zion, I know you missed a bit. We're talking about from the roster perspective, how are you expecting the offense to look different this year?
I expect it to be a lot faster of an offense, if I'm being honest. I mean, you have a guy in Ballo who played under Tommy Lloyd, and that's all he did is run at Arizona. And so when you have a center that can get up and down the court and won't get too fatigued, you didn't mention how he didn't play a lot of minutes. I think that probably might have been part of it, but who is at least used to running up and down the court, that unlocks so much, right? As good as Khalil Ware was, he didn't sprint down the court as well as maybe Trace Jackson-Davis did in the years before that, right? He wasn't as quick and as fast. Ballo can do that. And then, of course, the guards are super fast that you brought in between, Tucker, Rice, Carlisle. Those guards are super fast. We know Trey Galloway is at his best in transition when he's not, when all 10 eyeballs on the court aren't looking at him. So I think we're going to see an offense that is a lot quicker and a lot faster as long as they can secure those rebounds and get those stops, and they can move in transition. That is what I'm really looking forward to, because to me, they have the pieces to do that. And when you have an offense that can just outrun teams, it does take a toll throughout the course of a 40-minute game.
It's also the kind of formula, I think, that is going to help you dominate more inferior opponents early in the season. When you're more athletic, when you can get up and down, when you can play more possessions in a game, your talent tends to win out, and you win more of those possessions. And Indiana, kind of playing slower and everything through the post, it just kind of lent itself to some of those closer games last season. And so that's my other hope for really getting out and being able to play the efficiency margin game, which you may hate, but it's part of college basketball. And so you need to do, they kind of profile as a team that should be able to do that more naturally. All right, let's talk about shooting, because I think there are a lot of reasons to be optimistic that Indiana will finally take more three-point shots this season. I mean, it has been, and this goes back prior to Woody. This was the thing going all the way back to Archie, where Indiana has pretty much every season been ranked 300th or lower in three-point attempt rate. And there have been a couple seasons where the percentage was okay, but the rate didn't really rise. And so there are reasons to be optimistic because of who's on the roster, because of what Mike Woodson has actually said. I mean, he clearly has been thinking about this because he has said it. And so I want to play a couple of quotes right here, talk about the reasons to be optimistic, but also my fear that there may be a ceiling on what that optimism should be in terms of Indiana with three-point shooting. But let's hit this clip. Eddie, let's play the first clip now, and then I'll talk about
Coach Woodson don't like shooting threes. That's not true. My days in New York, if you go back and you do your homework on it, we led the league in threes taken and threes made, and we were third in field goals. We were shooting 33s a night in the NBA, which was unheard of. Mm-hmm. And then Curry and Harden, they changed the whole dynamics of what you see now in the NBA.
And he's right. You go back to that Knicks team, they took, I think, 28.9 threes per game. Their rate at that time was 35% of their shots were from 3-point range. That was number one in the league. I mean, they took more threes than anybody. So he is correct about that. The thing I sometimes wonder, though, is I wonder if Coach Woodson thinks about the amount that they were taking then as still being an extreme amount. Because if you took that number of 35% of your shots being from three, that would be in the 200s in college basketball. It would be below average. And he mentioned it there. I mean, Steph Curry comes along, changes the game. Now people are taking more and more and more. And so there is that, in Coach Woodson's mind, how many threes is too much. And he kind of gets at that with the second clip. Let's play clip number 2 now.
But if you don't have guys that can make the long ball, to me it's just a waste of time. It's a turnover, a wasted possession, because somebody wants you to jack up threes when you just don't have the personnel to make them. And I think this year we do now.
So as he said, with the personnel this year, he thinks we do now. They went out and recruited Luke Goody. I think Coach Woodson believes in the 3-point shooting of Miles Rice and Kanan Carlisle, which I do too, even though Rice was below 30% and Carlisle was 32% last year. I think those guys are shooters and Baco's a shooter. But, the thing we have to remember, Coach, and this may be what you were getting at, is in 2023, Indiana shot 36.8% from 3-point range. That was top 40 in the country. Miller Kopp shot 44% from 3-point range. Trey Galloway shot 46.2% from 3-point range. Those guys were elite shooters. But Miller Kopp was second to last on the team in shot percentage, and Trey Galloway was last on the team in shot percentage. So was that because Coach Woodson didn't really believe in them as shooters and kind of thought, hey, we'll take this high percentage, but we're not going to shoot more because we don't really believe they can keep making them? Or just from a philosophical standpoint, even if you have guys that start making them, is it just something where he really has to be pressed to do it? And I guess that's what I want to see this year. Now, he's talked about it. I'm certainly going to be open-minded about it. I think just by virtue of having a point guard like Miles Rice to drive and kick and find guys, and also secondary creators who can do it, Indiana's going to shoot more. I mean, if we're not at least at 35% of our attempts from 3-point range, I'll be shocked. But if we can be as good from a percentage-wise as I think, and I'm probably more bullish on it than other people, this is a team that should be in the top 100 taking threes. Because I think maybe the difference in how Coach Woodson seems to view it and how we view it is it's not just jacking up threes to jack up threes. It's jacking up threes with the knowledge of the impact it can have on your effective field goal percentage, and that a 33% 3-point shooter is just as good as a 50% 2-point shooter. And so getting that math to work in your favor on both ends, because it's also about reducing them, is just smart basketball math. And I was encouraged by the fact that HD Intelligence, who Alabama uses, who UConn uses, who Team USA uses, they were in Bloomington a couple of days ago, and they provide analytics on player performance and scheduling, both things that we've been talking about. And so maybe that shows that this program really is ready to take that next step in how they set up the roster and in how they, kind of view it from a strategic perspective to start focusing on it more. So look, getting up to 35% of our shots being from three, that would represent an 8% increase from last year. Like, if you told me I could put that in the bank right now, I'd probably take it just to make sure that it's more. But I think this team will be capable of taking even more. And that's where I'm curious to see how much room is there for this to grow, just based on how Coach Woodson sees the game of basketball.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I'll try to be somewhat concise. If he thought there weren't shooters, then he was doing the right thing and not having a lot of threes. I mean, you really, as a coach, I can't argue with that. If that's what he's reading, that his guys aren't capable of making threes, then why would you run plays for 3-point shots? Like, I agree with that. Now,
but in 2023,
but in his eyes,
okay, yeah,
they weren't. That's what I'm saying. If he is seeing in practice that is a low percentage shot, and he's got Trace Jackson Davis. The other thing that happens with us coaches, and it's happened with me at a much different level, is you get enamored with your best players. Like, you want your best players taking the volume of shots. So you don't mean to, but you emphasize to the team, Trace Jackson Davis got to get the ball. It's got to go through him. You've heard announcers say, every time down, the ball's got to touch this, got to touch that. Well, that can have a cumulative effect on the psyche of shooters, right? You got to catch with the idea I'm scoring every time. When this ball hits my hands, I'm shooting it. If you think I got to get it inside or I got to look inside, that takes a little rhythm away. And that's not intentional. I'm not trying to be critical or anything because we've all done it. You want to feed your hogs, right? Get the ball, volume of shots for your best players. And if you're evaluating that, Hood Schifino pull-up jumper is a better shot that we want, and so on is a better shot than you want, then you're going to run offense that way. I learned a valuable lesson when I went back as an assistant with my former assistant, and he had studied a lot of European basketball and a lot of stuff and how he could use that at the high school level. And he said early in the season he wants everyone taking shots. He's not going to talk about shot selection. He says because when it comes sectional time, we might need a kid to hit a big shot, and he's got to develop his confidence. So, yeah, we may not want that kid taking a lot of shots, but early in the season. Now, that's a whole lot different because everyone plays in the sectional no matter what your record is. You got to win games early here. I'm not trying to say that that's right, but that changed my philosophy of, hey, you got to encourage people to shoot the basketball. And so maybe that's a piece of it. But the college game has changed. It's a rim and three game, I believe, and you see that, and you see teams. I mentioned it earlier with the Power Four. I mean, Purdue had 7-7, and Trey Kaufman-Renn at the 4 and shot a lot of threes. So and made a lot at a high percentage. So I think you can do a variety of creative things to shoot the basketball better. DeCourcy said it. Almost everyone that talks about Indiana basketball, that you got to shoot the ball better. Some of that is better players. And I agree that we do. Some of that is scheme, and that's on Coach Woodson. He's got to develop a scheme and a style of playing. Zion's speed and pace is another way to get some good shots in that. He's got to get to it, stick to it, and believe it. And if he's make those changes, and that's a huge improvement, and Indiana should be okay.
So it's all about shooting.
Damn right.
That's right. Zion, what are you expecting from Indiana from a shooting perspective?
Yeah, first I want to give an obligatory shout out to Steve Novak when we talk about those old Knicks teams. That was my guy, sniper. But no, I agree with a lot of what Coach said there. It's about how you can find a way to create those shots. And now you feel like you have the downhill attackers that you didn't have last year that hopefully, they're getting downhill, assessing, okay, if there's 3 defenders in the paint, I can find a way to kick it out, find Mbako, find Goody, find Galloway for an open set shot. And it's about creating those shots, but making sure that creating those shots is a part of your offense. And so being able to use what you have as far as those downhill attackers, as far as the 2 big men who usually command a second defender, whether that's a full double team or just a dig or something, and being able to get out of that, rotate the ball around, and find the open man. And then also, I think a lot of this year is going to be about the two kind of small forwards on the team, and Luke Goody and Mackenzie Mbako. Can those guys make movement threes this season? Because if you have 2 guys like that who you are confident in creating movement threes off of screens, off of pin downs, whatever it may be, and making those 3-point shots, that changes your whole offense. Not a lot of college offenses have 2 guys you can say, okay, we can run him off of screens and take threes. We saw it happen more and more later in the year with Mbako. A lot of it was still mid-range shots, so maybe he stretches that out a bit more. I think Goody every now and then at Illinois got those shots. Most of his shots were more spot-ups, but if you can really feel confident in those 2 guys, one of them usually always being on the court and saying, hey, we can get him a movement, open shot, because then that creates more for the guy that's on ball. There's a lot of gravity that comes with that, and it just changes your entire offense. So creating those shots is huge this year. And obviously, you would like to make them at a better rate than what Indiana did last year, especially in the first half of the season.
Zion, I couldn't agree more. And they run stuff at times. They just don't, in my mind, run it enough. They'll come out of a half and run a little stagger double, and he could curl that for that pull-up jumper, or he can go out to 3, Mbako for that 3. They've run a variety of sets. But as the halves progress, they go more into the ball screen and the dribble drive or whatever they call their attack mode. And I think the creativeness of getting shooters in position, we called for that with Miller Kopp, and that's where, Jerod, I do agree with you. But I'm just pointing out from a coach's perspective where we get pigeonholed sometimes in, I don't think that guy's a good shooter. I don't want him shooting a lot of shots, or he'll shoot the wide open catch and shoot but nothing else because I want to really go here, and we got to take the blinders off sometimes as coaches and see that
You would never,
Whoa.
You would never get your shot off on me.
Coach Woodson dropped there.
He would be coming off those screens, right? Like we saw him when he played. But Zion, you're spot on. The creative catching threes off of the move is what you see UConn do, what you see Purdue do, the two teams in the national championship last year. And the other thing I'll say this, though, Kansas and Michigan State aren't high-volume threes, and they win high-low at Kansas, right? So, again, it's the creativeness in those programs to score points. Michigan State does it with their fast break. Kansas does it, in different ways. So I don't know that you have to be in the hundreds to win college basketball game. I'm not sure you need to be in the 300s like Indiana has been, 7 of the 8 years, last 8 years through 2 coaches. And the 1 year they weren't, they were 298 in threes taken, according to Ken Palm. College basketball is just different. I think Indiana needs to move more towards that.
Hey, if we have a top 25 offense, I'm not really going to quibble with how we get there. The problem is, when you have an offense like this and it really feels like there's kind of these unexplored avenues for added efficiency, that's where I think people get frustrated. But to me, this is the number one thing that I'm going to be looking for starting in the very first exhibition game, because, shot selection is a habit. Rebounding is another thing I always look for early. Does this team have good rebounding fundamentals and just a habit of attacking the glass? Because a lot of times those are things that reveal themselves early in a season, and you're talking about them all season long. If Indiana's coming out and taking 12, 13, 14 threes in these early games, that's not a lot of hope that all of a sudden come Big Ten play, you're going to start taking a whole lot more of them. That's something where I think if it's a real emphasis, I think we'll see it early, because those habits are being developed in practice, for what they're going to run. And so that to me is the single most important thing to watch for, because, again, I think this team has the personnel to do it. I think Mbako is a 40+% three-point shooter this year. Goody is already proven. I think Trey is going to get much more of the open catch and shoot looks that he got in 2023 and can get back into the mid-30s. And I believe in Rice and Carlisle as shooters, as guys who will make that jump from freshman to sophomore. So I think this roster will reward higher volume from three, maybe more so than rosters of the past. I think there's more depth of shooting. Now we'll see, easy to say in the offseason, but I think the personnel is there to do it. And maybe that's what Coach Woodson sees too. And that's why he's now more comfortable talking about it and saying that we're going to do it, because he believes that the shooting is better. And if so, that's fair. He's got to believe in it to go out there on the court and run it. So hopefully that's what we see. Any other thoughts, gentlemen, on shooting or offense or anything related to the new roster and hopefully the new look Hoosiers for this season?
It's also a recruiting issue, though, too. You lose McNeely to UConn. Mullins is maybe going to UConn, all shooting guards, right? So, again, maybe that signal to change up and shoot more threes, and what we heard in the clips is a recognition that in order to get some of these guys in that could help you shoot, you got to be creative, as Zion said, and you got to show it. You can't just say you're going to do it. You got to show it, I think, on film. So there's some connection in all the stuff that we're talking about. But it looks like there's progress in where the program might need to be in order to be steady. It looks like there's some acknowledgement of what hasn't worked and a movement towards getting better from the coaching staff. And I think all of us, regardless of where you're at with Coach Woodson, have to admit that he's had a really great offseason in a lot of areas.
Yep. Zion, any other final thoughts on the team before we start talking a little football?
No, I think we've covered just about everything I'm kind of curious to see in these first few weeks.
Excellent. All righty. Well, coming up here in our final segment of this week's show, we're going to talk a little football, including some clips from Curt Cignetti's recent media appearances, what we expect on Saturday versus Nebraska, and why we're all wearing black this evening, mourning the end of a great college basketball coaching career. More on that next. All right. Excited to see. I'm so curious what they look like the first couple games. I really am.
Yeah. All I know, Jerod, is tomorrow night I'm going to I'm going to get home as late as I possibly can, and then I'm going to get up and drive to Bloomington, and then I'm going to have a little breakfast, and then I'm going to go and at 12 o'clock, the kickoff we'll have, and I'm going to watch IU kick some ass. I mean, I just think that's a good recipe for, going to a football game. I heard that somewhere.
I love it.
Get home late, get a good breakfast, go watch them kick some ass, and then go home. I mean, and I'm going to call it a day Saturday now. I'll be home about 6 o'clock, and everything will be good.
That is so funny. Okay, so if you don't know what Coach is referring to, this was a Signetti comment when he was on the Pat McAfee show, and he was talking about how he likes to get to the hotel as late as possible when they're on the road. And so he said, we got there at 8:30. Maybe we'll do a little, got there at 8:30, had a meal, did a short meeting, woke up, kicked their ass, came home. That's the great thing about Signetti. It's weird to hear a coach say that, but that is what happened. We did kick their ass. And if they had kicked our ass, he would have said that. He would have said they kicked our ass. He just doesn't have a filter. It's great. But he just says it how he sees it. It's very refreshing. Very, very refreshing.
It is so refreshing.
It's so great. Okay. And the other thing he said, and we'll talk about this here because I don't want to talk about it on the podcast, but he was talking about how he doesn't like to waste people's time. So they'll do an hour and 45 minutes of practice, or other people may do for 2 hours and 15 minutes. If you get your work done, go home. What do you think he would say if someone told him about Tom Crean's habit of not scheduling practices and just texting the guys the day of practice? Would that even compute to him? It's like a strategy that a college coach would use.
Not at all.
Kurt Signetti needs a schedule. That is, if anything I've learned about him in the last couple months, he needs a schedule. He needs to know what's going on when.
Have you had the chance to interact with him personally?
A little bit. I did some of the spring football stuff in the fall or in the spring. And then I went to Big Ten Media Days in late July. So I've had a little bit of interaction with him. Actually, the story I wrote at Big Ten Media Days was about that UCLA game where he kind of detailed how he wanted to get there as late as possible and get to that game. So a little bit of interaction with him, but not a ton.
So it's a great comment in the chat about Crean and Signetti. Oil and water would have made a great SNL skit. Yes, just like a coaching conversation between Tom Allen, Tom Crean, and Kurt Signetti. Just the directions that would go.
Whoa.
And they all had success. They all had success doing it their way. I think one probably is going to have more sustained success doing it his way. But anyway, all right, let's hop in. Let's talk about this. And then we'll get out of here.
Mickey
Eddie?
Mouse.
Let's do it.
This is Nick Zeisloft. I never miss an open three, and I never miss an episode of The Assembly Call.
Thank you, Nick. Welcome back to The Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris here with Coach Tonsoni and our special guest, Zion Brown. And gentlemen, in what is now becoming a habit here on The Assembly Call, we are going to spend segment 3 talking a little football. It's so much fun. It's irresistible. One of my favorite things is, so here in Dallas, the radio station I listen to, The Ticket, Joel Klatt does a segment every week. And I think now it's the last 3 weeks, 2 topics have come up each week. How terrible Purdue is. So whenever they're talking about terrible football, they use Purdue as an example. And how great Indiana is. In fact, one of the Dallas radio hosts, they have no reason to talk about Indiana. Indiana's not playing a team from down here. But he's like, is Indiana the most interesting team in college football this year? And they just spent some time talking about it. And so it's great to be outside of Bloomington and have Indiana football be a topic like this because we're just good. We are legitimately good. 6-0. And Coach, we have a really big opportunity this week, certainly the biggest test of the year against Nebraska. Nebraska isn't elite by any means, but they're rock solid. I mean, they put it to Colorado earlier this year, who's proven to be a little bit better than maybe people thought. So they can do some things. They got a good young freshman quarterback. They're good along the lines. They're going to come into Memorial Stadium and, not be afraid. They got a good, solid coach in Matt Rule. So I expect the most competitive game that we've seen for Indiana this season. You're going to be there in the building. What's your gut feeling? What are you expecting on Saturday?
It's a confidence where Indiana football, you usually would drive down and if this happens and this happens and this happens, maybe we'll have a chance to win in the fourth quarter. Now it is something good's going to happen for Nebraska to beat us. That's just as a fan, as a 30-year season ticket holder, I haven't had that feeling for a long time. But it changed at halftime of the UCLA right after that UCLA game when it got a little tight right there at the beginning of the second half, and then all of a sudden, boom, 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 and it just dawned on me, this is different. And then, even Northwestern, it got down to 3. You felt that nerve come back for about just a second, and then no, it just, boom, took off from there. Indiana's going to lose a football game or two this year. There's no doubt about it. They're going to run into some superior, talented teams and maybe play poorly at some point. But it's one of those where we used to have that in basketball, where every game you thought Indiana was going to win, and then you were just disappointed when they were losing, instead of the doom and gloom of, oh my gosh, how can we find 4 or 5 victories? Can we ever get to bowl eligible for the Purdue game? Those things, it's just over. I think it's a good matchup. I think Indiana's offense and defense is better collectively than Nebraska's offense and defense. I read Hoosier Huddle's breakdown of Nebraska, and it made me feel a lot more calm. That they have a really good quarterback, but he's hot and cold. We are one thing. We're consistent. There's been some scoring or some bad interceptions, but we're going to hang 40 on you, and we're going to bounce back from mistakes. It looks like Nebraska has won some games, but they've been inconsistent. So unless they fix that in their bye week, and anything can happen. But it's a confidence level, Jerod, that's really fun to have with football.
Man, it is. When I realized it was during the Maryland game when, obviously we opened up with all those turnovers, and I don't think they took the lead, but they maybe tied it or were within one score at the start of the second half. And I remember texting you guys. I was like, we're going to win this game like 49-21 or whatever it was. Because even we had the big mistakes, but it just felt like on a possession-by-possession basis, we were kicking their butt up and down the field. And sure enough, as the game went on, we did. And that score actually almost ended up being the score until Maryland scored late. And it was one of those things, like, confidence in Indiana football has rarely been rewarded. A lot of times you get kicked in the teeth. And that's what's been different about this. It's like every time you want to put like a half foot in, you feel bad for not stepping in with 2 feet because the team keeps rewarding you, which is a great place to be in. And I think is just indicative of the program, the Kurt Cignetti football machine that he just takes from university to university. And Zion, as I look at this game, again, I think it will be competitive. To me, it comes down to, we have a 5th-year senior quarterback at home, and they have a freshman quarterback on the road. And a lot of times when things seem equal, that is often the difference maker. And so I think Raiola will make some big plays. He's very talented, but just the utter consistency of Rourke and his receivers, I think you're going to have to be really, really, really good to beat that for 60 minutes, like Ohio State type good. And so that's why I think Indiana's going to be favored in all the games between now and then. And that's why, I feel good about Saturday, and maybe at some point, that, we do have just kind of a bad game or, it doesn't work out that way, but that's given me confidence heading into Saturday. What do you think?
No, that's a good point about just Nebraska going on the road. It's only their second road game. The other one being Purdue, which it might just be the worst team in Power 4. So
barely counts.
It's like you're not really yeah. So you're not really scared of going up to Purdue this season. But yeah, I'm really curious to see IU's defense versus the Nebraska offense, because a couple weeks ago, last time we saw IU, there were some hiccups, especially in the secondary in that Northwestern game, right? And so it's about, can they clean those up? And I want to see if Nebraska, because I've caught glimpses of Nebraska here and there this year. It doesn't feel like they have Raiola like airing the ball out a lot, which I know he can. There's a reason he was, a 5-star, highly rated quarterback. It's because he can do that, right? Like a lot of the stuff he does is kind of check downs, easier, simpler stuff. But if they want to test IU in that secondary, those safeties, I think they definitely could. But I am just excited for the environment. I'll also be there at the game. And it's going to be the best environment in Memorial Stadium, I'd say, since 3 years ago when they hosted Cincinnati early on in the season and lost that game in a heartbreaker. So I just can't wait to see like a real football-heavy environment with all those people in the sold-out stadium.
Yeah. Zion, it's a blast. 1987, IU beats Michigan. Billy Reiser block punt in the rain with a wine flask as a college student around. I still have the shirt stained from the rain, and just Bo Schembechler mad because we had crowd noise. I hope you guys
Shove
get
it,
that.
Bo. Shove it.
Yeah, I hope you guys get that because that year, it's fantastic. I mean, I love Assembly Hall, and when we're good, that place is loud. But it's so fun to have a football program that's successful. So, yeah, a packed rock is absolutely a blast.
I was 6 years old for that game. Up in the
6 years
stands,
old
in the rain.
Yeah.
And
14-7,
I had after that
like
game. 1987. I had this little framed drawing in my room. It was this little kid. It was like a painting, wearing like a red shirt and laying out in some leaves with his head on a football. And it said, "A boy, a ball, a dream." And then as he was dreaming, it shows the scoreboard 14-10, the famous scoreboard for the Michigan game. I mean, look, is it sad that we have to go back to the 80s to reminisce about victories over Michigan and Ohio State? Sure, it is. This is Indiana football. But you know what? Those memories are very dear. And now we have a new coach who, like Mallory, I think can come and create them and make it a more consistent thing. So let's go. It starts with Nebraska, and we'll get our chances with Michigan and Ohio State coming up later. So here's something I want to address. And this great comment here from Ufda. He's not like getting me to say something dirty, is he, with that Ufda? Down here in Florida, he says, I hear people talking about IU and Coach Cignetti a lot now. Lots of the local chatter is them wanting to steal Sig from us for the Gators. I actually have a Florida fan in my neighborhood that we've talked about that. He said, not a fan of those conversations, LOL. So Kurt Cignetti did a lot of interviews this week, using his off week wisely to go be an ambassador for the program. He was on with Pat McAfee, did several others, but one in particular, he did a long form interview with Hoosiers Connect that I thought was really good, I think, on this particular topic. So Eddie, let's play that first clip where he talks about how much he loves it in Bloomington.
I like it here a lot, and I really like Scott Dolson and Pam Whitten a lot. And as long as we're committed to being the best we can be, I have everything I need. Now, I also know how quickly things can change.
Yeah, right.
Right? I mean, you're on top of the mountain one day and at the bottom the next.
So, Zion, I'm curious just to get your reaction to that. And, I know you've had some interactions, with Kurt Cignetti, but, I know you've seen some of these concerns, or Indiana fans, as soon as a coach has any level of success, we're always afraid that someone's going to come poach him. But the landscape is different now. And so I'm curious, when you hear him say that, what is your confidence level that we'll be able to keep Kurt Cignetti for the long term?
I think he meant exactly what he said in that clip. I mean, truly. I feel like, last year with how bad the football team was, again, I think it was a wake-up call for the IU administration, especially with the changing landscape where everything that's changing in the college football landscape is being ruled by football. So if you have a football team that is embarrassingly bad year in and year out, you are going to be left to the side. And so I think that starts with just the commitment you put into it and the commitment you put into getting a good coach and making sure that coach has what he needs to field a competitive football team. And so when Kurt Cignetti says that, I think he means what he says. Like I said, I think he truly feels like if the commitment is there, if it is at his level where he can compete to be a team that wins 8 to 10 games every year at IU, then he feels like he can stay. But if not, then maybe he would leave. And I don't think he would leave right now. I just don't see that happening this year right now. But if he's not getting some of the changes that he wants in the coming years, maybe that'll happen. But right now, if the Florida job opens up, which it seems like it probably will, I don't see that being – they'll definitely reach out if I had to assume, if I had to guess, but I don't see him dipping after 1 year to go there.
I'm with you. And Coach, I think if we've learned anything about Kurt Cignetti, it's that, I don't think he comes here if he didn't really believe that there was a commitment, to football. And I think Scott Dolson, understands what Zion said, how important football is. Now, I do think, and Zion, you said this, and Kurt Cignetti clearly alluded to it there, I think he will keep constant pressure on Indiana to continue to provide the resources it takes to be competitive. And I think if he notices that is dropping off at all, I think he would probably be on the next flight out of here because he knows how good he is and he knows he can win. So, I think it's one of those things. I do think Indiana fans can feel comfortable that he's not just going to bounce after one season. I really don't believe that. But I do believe, Indiana can't do this thing where it's like, hey, we're in for football. We're out. We're in. We're out. The Mallory staff had to beg for the most basic of resources and rarely got them. And you can't do that anymore. football has to be first and it has to be a priority. And I think he'll make sure Indiana's doing that. And as long as that's the case, his wife likes Bloomington, he likes it. If he can win here, then, he can build a real legacy here in a way that maybe, he can't even at some other schools.
The key thing there, he said he wants to coach for a long time. He thinks he has the energy to do it. What's the best path to do that? Is the best path to build Indiana to that 8-win game or 8-winning team each year and staying here and building that? And it might be a change at the back end if he wants to go chase that last job. But what's the life expectancy of a coach at Florida? I mean, he Google him, he wins, so he's not going to think he's going to be like that. But they've been through like 87 coaches in my lifetime, I think, at Florida, right? Spurrier was there for a while, and Urban was down there until, Urban did Urban things. I can't wait to see him Saturday at the big noon kickoff. I usually yell some things at him. But, do you want to run the risk if you have something good here and you are like unbelievably loved because you got 6 wins already, and if you can consistently win at a level that you're satisfied with, I think he could stay, maybe until the money isn't enticing on the back end. But at his age, I think winning is more important and stability might be more important. And the other thing was, he said he had a lifetime guarantee at JMU, and he was okay with that, and he thought maybe this was the one move that he wanted to make, and maybe that's just wishful thinking from IU fans. I don't see him 1 year and out. I really don't, because of
here's
what
the thing
said.
to remember. Coach, at JMU, they're not in the Big Ten or the SEC. And those are the coveted jobs. You've got to get in the Big Ten or the SEC because every new report that comes out, it's more and more about the Big Ten and SEC kind of starting to do their own thing. Now, will they break away? I have no idea, but it's very clear these are the 2 premier leagues that you want to be in. And now he's got one of those jobs. And so if your resources are competitive and you have one of those jobs and you're in those conferences, which are probably going to have some recruiting benefits because of the stature that they have, there is something to be said, especially as you get older. I think you start thinking a little bit more about quality of life, and, being a hero at Bloomington may be a lot better than chasing ghosts at other schools, And so, and if he can do that and, and win at a high level, which he clearly has confidence in. So I think, look, it's always good, I think, for Indiana football fans to approach things with humility. That has been our lot in the college football world, and that hasn't changed yet. But I think there's also reasons to have confidence that as long as we hold up our end of the bargain, this could be something that lasts. Just like Coach Mallory. I mean, he was National Coach of the Year. He could have gone places. He wanted to stay here and build something in Bloomington because, there's something special about this place. I remember, I sent out a tweet about that and everybody mocked it. Like, oh yeah, there's something special about Indiana football. People misread it. There's something special about Bloomington, Indiana. And when you get there and it gets in your blood and you're having success at your sport, you want to stay there. And so if we give him the resources to be successful and he knows what to do with them, I think there's reasons to always have a little caution, and let's make sure we're all doing our part as fans and packing the rock and doing all that stuff and studying later and all that. But I think there's some reasons to be confident. Anything else, Zion, that you want to say just about kind of the football program? Like, what's the vibe on campus when it comes to football? I mean, I have to imagine that it's different and better than anything you've experienced since you've been on campus. Like, I mean, that's maybe the understatement of the year.
It truly is, right? And it's a low bar to set, but it just picks up every single week. You see the excitement grow more and more and more. And a few weeks ago, that Maryland game, from a student perspective, we were sitting there in the rain and everybody stayed, right? It wasn't like the first few weeks, the FIU game or the Charlotte game or the Western Illinois game where people were gone after a quarter or after a half of football. Everybody stayed for that entire game, and I expect the same against Nebraska this weekend. Like, as the weeks go by, as they continue to win games, the level of excitement and just energy around the football team picks up. And I know this is considered like the first big test of the year. So if they go out at home and win this game, it'll just skyrocket even more. So the students around here and the people around Bloomington are just enamored with what's going on with the football program right now. And it's showing now in the 2 sold-out games they have, Nebraska and Michigan.
It's not fluky. It's not gimmicky. It's just rock solid football. And that is so much fun to watch. So much fun to watch. All right, our last topic. As I was preparing this show tonight, as of about 5:30, I thought that we would be done at this point in time. But we have one more story that we have to talk about. deals with another elite coach. This is why we're all wearing black. Here, Eddie is playing the sad violin music. Today we got the sudden news, though I don't really think surprising when you think about it, that Tony Bennett is stepping down as the head coach at the University of Virginia. Obviously, it's been a running joke on this show how much I admire and respect Tony Bennett. I would say probably outside of Indiana teams, that 2019 Virginia team is one of my favorite college basketball teams. I just really appreciated the way they bounced back from the disappointment of the previous year, how they played, how they conducted themselves. They had a lot of likable players. They kept Purdue out of the Final Four. So for all those reasons, it was a team to really like. But Tony Bennett is stepping down. We don't know the official reason. He's going to have a press conference tomorrow. But, Gary Parrish, I thought, had a really nice emergency pod on the Eye of College Basketball podcast. And Jeff Borzello had a really interesting, he relayed an interesting comment Tony Bennett had made to him at ACC Media Day, about guys like Jay Wright leaving. And as you start to see things change and maybe that you don't like or that you don't know how to operate in, you've got to make that decision for yourself. And so it seems like maybe at that time, this was on his mind. And so we'll find out the reasoning. Is it because, the timing is obviously strange with the season 3 weeks away? So did he just get into it and realize he doesn't have the heart for it and wanted to get out? Does he want his assistant to get the job? We don't know all of these things. But I do think, Coach, my takeaway from it, obviously I just, I like having Tony Bennett in college basketball. Ryan can be here to talk about how much he hates the mover blocker offense and all that stuff. And, I know that it had its limitations in the tournament. So I don't think he was the perfect basketball coach by any means. But I do think college basketball is not as rich of a place with Jay Wright not in it and with Tony Bennett not in it. These are great coaches. These are great leaders who I think really understood and believed in what the college athletic experience was supposed to be about. And I think you and I agree, Coach, and I think Zion probably agrees with this as well, that, the move toward fewer restrictions on player movement is good. The move to, maybe not this much, this much movement, but giving athletes more freedom, giving athletes their piece of the monetary pie. These are good changes. But if the sport doesn't have room for Tony Bennett, if it doesn't have room for Jay Wright, if it doesn't have room for some of these other guys, that really suggests to me that whatever the more sane end game is that we're going to get to when things feel a little bit more stable and there's more rules and there's more guardrails, we need to get there because we're losing some really important people in the game. And I think they're getting out of it, because it's not the game that they got into to coach anymore. And I don't think you have to have sympathy for them and feel sorry for them. They've made a lot of money. But you can empathize with, hey, I could do whatever I want to do. I don't want to do this anymore. But I think college basketball just isn't quite as rich of a place for the players, the fans, and everybody when personalities and successful coaches like those guys aren't in it. And it just concerns me as a college basketball fan because, to me, the game I grew up loving, the soul of it bleeds out a little bit as these guys leave and don't retire because they're done coaching. They retire because there's something endemic about the game that they don't like and believe in anymore. So what the answers are to that, I don't know. I just think we need to get to a more sane place a little bit quicker. What that is, I don't exactly know. But anyway, those are my thoughts on a sad day when one of my favorite coaches retires.
First of all, Coach Bennett was an outstanding coach, did things right, very successful, and it's sad to see him go. Even though, I wasn't a Virginia fan by any means. But you're seeing it in football. Saban left for some of the very same reasons. You're seeing some of those veteran coaches get out with the new system. And I think you're also seeing some fans start to check out. And maybe, the money's not being checked out because that's always going to be a big part of college athletics and people donate back to their schools and all of that stuff. You do wonder at some point if the NIL stuff dries up 4 or 5 years down the line. But I do think we have to have some sensible guardrails to keep college basketball where it's at because it's in a more wild west than even the pros who had free agency and everything else. It is, I've said multiple times, I'm rooting for jerseys. I've enjoyed college football this year because I can watch LSU and Ole Miss and not know who's getting what money and whatever. I love, the stadiums and all of those types of things. But the college game is losing some of that, the lure for me. And maybe us old guys just got to say, it's time for new guys to do stuff too. You know, it's a new way of doing things. Suck it up and deal with it or get out. I think there's some reality to that too. It's we all can't be the old man, get off my lawn. Like, it's time to turn it over to Zion and the younger guys, right, on the podcast, and get the old guys to go to bed earlier. And so there's some truth to that as well. But it is, to me, I've lost interest in what I used to read rosters and preview books and blue ribbon head to toe. And now it's just like, if a team wins, I'm going to put them in for bracketology. If a team doesn't win, I've lost some of my passion because of the free agent stuff just all around. It's not an Indiana-based comment there. So hopefully that doesn't derail the whole college stuff at some point, and they can get to the guardrails and it can get back to some balance. I think would be very important.
Yeah, Zion, how do you view this?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting dichotomy where college sports has been professional kind of for a while now in the way that they just generate money, right? But it didn't feel that way from a viewership, from a fan perspective, taking it in, and even not in the complete sense. I don't think it felt that way for the coaches, but now it is becoming that. And like Coach said, the guardrails aren't even there that you have in the pros, where you kind of know, you kind of have a good sense of, okay, we have this much money to spend and whatnot or whatever. Whereas right now in college basketball, it is truly the wild, wild west. Tony Bennett's only 55. Maybe in 6 or 7 years where there's a clearer path for who can do what and what everything is as far as NIL, players actually getting paid by the schools, all of that stuff goes, transfer portal rules. There's no telling that he could just want to walk back into the game, right? So I could see something like that happen, but it is just strange to see how many quality coaches have walked away from the college game lately. You know, we came a few hours away from Dan Hurley, who is on the top of the college basketball world, potentially doing that earlier in the spring. So there's certainly things that need to be figured out and that need to be adjusted so that this doesn't keep happening, and so that the general joy that either a fan or a coach and even the players have for the game can stay at a high level, so everybody can feel like they're getting something out of college athletics and college basketball.
Yeah, and again, you know, I don't have a problem with the macro level changes. It's just the way that they've gone about it and how they've allowed it to be complete chaos. I get it. I mean, you know, and growing up in a coaching family, understanding how chaotic it already was, and then, I mean, I've had conversations with my dad about what it must be like now, and I mean, it's just, you know, again, you're well compensated, but it's different. It requires a different mentality. And so I guess, you know, Coach, it's about, and Zion, like you said, it's really been professional for a long time. Even if we wanted to pretend that it's not, but there were still kind of certain values in the college sports experience that are important. And, I think, Jen, mentioned one in the chat. It might be naive or altruistic, but I love having guys who came to IU to be Hoosiers, not for money. And I agree. You want guys that want to be part of the campus experience and get into the university, and the money can be a part of it. But also you want to see teams grow together. That's what makes basketball fun. And so this could be as simple as employment contracts and, have guys sign 2, 3, 4-year contracts based on the money they're going to get. More of a pro model, but you're still going to school. You're representing the university. Some of those things are there, but you just have a little more sanity from a coach's perspective. They don't have to recruit their own roster and high school guys and the portal, and from a fan perspective, you don't just throw your hands up with recruiting like we did earlier tonight. You kind of have an idea of who's going to be on the team a little bit more, and that allows those connections to come back. And we say all that, and the first 6 weeks of this Indiana football season have been incredible, and it's with a new coach and a whole lot of new players, but the winning has been good, and the performance has been good, and the atmospheres have been good, and it's still great, I mean, I stayed up late watching the Georgia-Alabama game, and it's like, man, this sport, no matter how hard it tries to hurt itself, it just delivers because there's just a pageantry and passion and emotion that you don't get anywhere else. So, I'm not decrying college sports and saying I'm not a fan and everything's bad. I just want to be careful. I think these are little warning signs, little red flags that we should take note of and just make sure that we maintain the values that make college sports special. Because if it's just pro sports, I'll go watch the better players. There's always got to be something different about college. And so we just have to make sure that we do that. And hopefully we're on the path toward making some of those changes that a guy like Jerod, a guy like Tony Bennett would still want to be a part of it, because it'll make college sports better.
It will, but there's an underlying thing that there's no teeth in any organization that runs the NCAA. The NBA can have its rules and take away draft picks and fine people and do that, but the policing of the NCAA has been a joke for years, right? So you set guardrails, you set a salary cap, you set kids don't, can class or whatever. That's always going to be circumvented. It always has been in the past to some extent, but at least you had kids had to go to class and had to have a GPA and had to do those. Like, I'm a proponent now why do these kids have to go to class? It's kind of hypocritical that all the rules that we had are gone on one end, but you got to be eligible on the others. These are pros. They're not students. They're pros. Well, they could have the option of going to school if they wanted to while they're there, but we got to have this for class and schedule it. Come on, man. It's bigger than that now. And that kind of talk bothers me where it be what it is. We want what it was and it's not. So don't kind of try to hang on to little pieces of the past. Just go to the new model and put some guardrails on it that still kind of can have multi-year contracts or something like you suggested. But man, it's, I just find it to be, I don't know. I'm old. I'll shut up.
I was not expecting the teacher to advocate for no longer having players go to class, but I get what you're saying. I mean,
if you're making 1.2 million, why do you need to go to class? I mean, you can go back and go to class afterwards, right? You work on basketball, like the 20-hour rule. You're paying a kid 1.2 million, but you can't coach him for more than 20 hours. That's not a good return on your investment right there, right? It's just not. So if you want to make money and win, get him in the gym as much as you want while he's a student. It's hypocritical in a lot of ways to me. And it needs to be fixed. It's the bottom line. There needs to be a better system and still pay the players and still let them transfer. I'm not against that, but the system as it is right now is really hypocritical to me, driven by money.
So on that point, and this will be my last question to you, Zion, I'm curious to get your thoughts on it, because that is interesting, Coach, and I think you make a good point. I also think it is different from professional sports because most professional athletes are in their 20s, in their 30s. They're more mature as humans. And college athletes are still 18 to 22. And the development, the kind of the molding of young minds, that whole cliche that we've always talked about, it does feel like there's still room for that and getting an education, because most of the college athletes aren't going to go professional. And maybe, Zion, this is where you don't have an NCAA, but if the Big Ten and SEC do their own thing, they put their own rules in place that they can then enforce, just like an NFL. And maybe that's what we have to go to. And there's different rules at different levels. Who knows? But, I'm curious from your perspective as someone who's in college right now. I mean, do you think that would be a benefit, or do you think there is still room for guys to be able to enjoy the spoils of professionalism, which is the money, and some of the freedom in terms of where they're going to play and all that stuff, but still some structure that helps them grow and develop as people at, a really critical time in everybody's just human development?
Yeah, I get both sides of it. I would say that there still is a benefit to having these players enrolled in classes and going to classes, but I get where Coach is coming from. Where definitely, I would agree with him on the the 20-hour rule, especially in the next year or two when these athletes actually are getting paid by the school. Right now, they're still not technically being paid by the schools, but when that comes in with the revenue sharing here in a couple of years, I think that rule should be gone if you're getting paid by the school directly. But as far as going to class, I still feel like you should still strive to hold a model that, at the very least, encourages education. Whether what a specific athlete or a player does with that is up to themselves, right? But I think you still have to have a model that encourages and promotes education, because of what you said about how most of these people are not going to play pro basketball or pro in whatever sport. And even if they do, it may not make them enough money to just kind of sit on for the rest of their lives after they're, 35 or 40 years old and have to retire.
Yeah, and maybe eligibility isn't tied to it, but it becomes a positioning thing on the recruiting trail with parents. It's like, hey, we take education seriously at this school. They don't over here. They don't have to, but you come here, your child will be taken care of. And so, who knows? I mean, I think you could leave some of that open to the school a little bit, but who knows?
I'm the biggest proponent of education, and I agree with what you guys are saying. But if there is a kid being recruited right now and he's coming to a school for the educational purposes, I don't buy that with the money that is being thrown out, 500, 700,000. Your first question right now is how much money am I going to make right now? Or if I go to a school and develop, right? Even at the smaller schools, what's my NIL? What's my NIL? I think that devalues. I mean, I don't know.
Not many guys are making life-changing money for NIL, so the education still matters, or should still matter to them. For the long term, it certainly will to their parents.
My counterpoint will be that I agree. I would say most of these players, these kids right now, are probably asking right up front, like, hey, how much do you think I would make in NIL if I came to such and such school? However, that doesn't mean that when they get to the school and they get enrolled into classes, that they still can't become enamored into a specific topic and specific field that they end up making a career out of after they play basketball or after they play football.
No, I don't disagree. I don't disagree with you. But when kids are saying, "Pay me $10,000 to come do an official visit," I don't think education in these AAU programs and with these football players, I don't think it should be. That's where I agree with you, Zion and Jerod. It should be, and that's what we're losing. My point is we're losing that because it's now a minor league system, and you're all right. I totally agree with both of you. It should be a component, and kids should have it. And I think that it is very, very important. But I'm just taking the side of this. Like, if it's about money, then make it about money. Don't sell me a dog and pony show that you're all altruistic and doing all this good stuff when it's really about Big Ten contract money and all of that stuff. Be what you are. It is about money. It is about money. It's about money for the university. It's about money for the kids. And part of my problem with all of this is I want it to be Indiana to win, the school to win. Like, and I don't know, you get a coach like Signetti and we're winning right now, so it's good. But there's a lot of problems with all of this underlying it, but what it is.
I'm with you. Let's just lay our cards on the table. The NFL lays its cards on the table, for better or worse. That is a money-making machine that cares about money at the expense of all other things, and at least everybody knows it. All I'm saying is college sports needs to remember part of what makes it special to a lot of people, and some of those values can easily get ignored when you just focus on money. We have the leagues that do that already. So I just think long-term, being smart from how do we keep fans engaged and keep this different and position ourselves different from the other professional leagues, I think that's part of it. That's why people relate with college players, especially alums, because it's like they're going to school like I did. I have something in common with these guys, kind of, but it's something. It's a different connection than when you're just rooting for a professional. Anyway, a lot to discuss on that, but I just think every time a coach like Tony Bennett decides he wants to walk away from it, it makes me think, what's wrong here, and what can we make better, and what do we need to make sure that we not lose? And so hopefully there's somebody somewhere or some people that are thinking about this and can figure out a path for at least some of the conferences to move forward with it. All right, Eddie, let's cue up that closing music, because that is going to do it for us on this week's edition of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, you can join us at assemblycall.com on the nights when we do shows for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. Thank you to Bob Thompson for producing our music. Thank you to John Ringer of rigdesign.com for designing our logos. Thank you to producer Eddie for being here and helping to make the production of this show so much better. And thank you, as always, for listening. We will be back, hopefully, next Sunday after the IU-Tennessee game. If we do a show before then, we will alert you via email and on Twitter. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. Go Hoosiers.
Here I come. This is Tonsoni.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out.
Zion, thanks for hanging, man. Awesome insight, as always.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on, guys.
For sure.
Always good to hear your perspectives. There's a lot of things that I agree with. So, yeah, I guess I like that. I'd even like it if I disagreed, because you do your job well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it is, man. We look forward to listening to you on the Marion game and all the other games you do this year. Keep up the good work, man.
All right. Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
All right. Thanks, Zion. And thanks, everybody, for being here live. Coach, as always, thank you for being here. If you're listening on the podcast, I do have a fun little song prepared that I will tack on to the end of the podcast edition. It's a little ode to a fun night in West Lafayette a couple of years ago that there may or may not still be secret videos of that we will never release to the public.
Oh, no.
But we made a little song to commemorate that. So if you're listening on the podcast feed, yes, if you're listening on the podcast feed, I'll tack that to the end of it just for fun, just as a little fun listen.
We're not going to hear it here?
Now the music doesn't play well on StreamYard. That's the problem. Like, it doesn't come through that well. So it's better to play on I'll just throw it on the podcast and I'll post it on YouTube. So we'll do it. I think I've sent it to you before.
Oh,
but anyway,
okay.
It'll be fun. Some people will hate it. Some people will like it. It's fine.
I have to replay every show to think what stupid shit I said all the time. You know, and what the drops are going to be. Shine the turd up a little bit. Let's go. There you go. There you go. That's an example. That's Amy's like, how is the show? I'm like, well, I don't know. I think there might have been 7 or 8 things that are going to get clipped and used against me for the rest of the time.
You dumbass.
What was the one? Oh, the feed your hogs. That was definitely said this episode.
Always good for 1 or 2 stupid things. Every yeah.
But sometimes you're on fire. You're the Devontae Green of the assembly call. I mean, there's some boneheaded things, but man, when you're on fire, you are on fire.
Yeah, I think about that every time I eat carrots at lunch. I still don't like that dude.
All right, man. You two cheer loudly on Saturday for those of us who can't be there.
Hey, I'm going to see Andy. Andy and Jen and kids, I believe, are coming in. So
that's awesome.
Going to have them over for a little breakfast in the morning.
Very nice.
Coach, what are we grilling up? I'd love to know what your tailgate setup looks like, because I know what mine's going to be, but it will not be on Coach Tonsoni level.
We've tamed it down a lot since the last time you were there for a variety of reasons. But we're having some bacon, some sausage, and French toast. French toast sticks, so you could just dip them in some syrup and a little breakfast. It's going to be cold, Eddie, in the morning.
I know.
Like 38, 39 when you get there. So,
yeah, we got the little solo stove that we might roll out for a little bit just to keep the wife and the kid happy. But I think it's going to be a really good time. By the time kickoff happens, we should be good on temps. So,
where do you park, Eddie?
Lot 12.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I think that's where Andy's parking too, and I may end up down there. So maybe I'll run into you.
I always see Galen. He's like 3 or 4 spots down from me, acting a fool. An hour or 2.
I know where you're at then.
He's gonna be just going nuts.
Yeah,
we need to get a new Galen gif out of this Saturday.
Hey, he's a few rows below me. I can just get the phone out and just watch.
Do it. We just need Galen Cam. I would watch Galen Cam if someone just had a video of him the entire
live from the
with an
rock.
audio feed. Yeah, with an audio feed. Just I need that. All right, fellas.
Good night, everybody.
Rest. Take care, everybody. Thanks, Zion.
Hey, guys.